Snow had started to fall just before 4. Light flurries first, the kind that twirl in the air like they're unsure about landing, before deciding to stick and weigh the branches down in quiet defiance. From the window of our living room, everything outside looked like a postcard. The Carter house, white siding, green shutters, wreaths on every window, had always played the part well. Christmas lights blinked in timed perfection, framing a scene I knew was just decoration. Inside, the heat hummed low, the fireplace flickered to life with well-stacked logs, and the kitchen smelled of baked ham and cinnamon rolls. Everything smelled right, but my chest had that hollow tension, the kind where the air around you is warm, yet nothing touches the inside. I stood near the door, holding the Pyrex dish I had baked, rosemary rolls with garlic butter. No one greeted me. Not even Eileen, who was already mingling, laughing her golden laugh, her wine-colored sweater matching the ribbons on the gifts stacked in the corner. "Oh, good! You're here!" Mom called over her shoulder, not looking. "You can put that, whatever it is with the extras." Whatever it is. I bit the inside of my cheek. "It's the bread for the table." "Oh, we already have baguettes, sweetheart." She gestured vaguely. "Maybe the kids' table?" I followed her gaze to the folding table set up near the sliding glass doors, 4 low chairs, plastic cutlery, and mismatched plates with cartoon reindeer. There it was again. But I stopped. What was the point? I placed the rolls gently on the corner, adjusting the dish towel out of habit, not that anyone would care how they were presented. Behind me, Eileen breezed by, perfume first. "You can squeeze in over there," she said, pointing to the kiddie table without breaking her stride. We had to make space at the main one. Of course. I turned to see the dining room table already filled, Mom and Dad at the heads, Aileen next to Dad, then her boyfriend, and a few aunts and uncles, all laughing, drinking, not one empty seat. A cousin whispered to her sister and looked at me. I caught her eyes. She looked away. I'd been moved before. Sat on footstools, folding chairs. Once even ate my slice of pie standing in the hallway because guests come first. But this year, it burned deeper. I had driven home through a snowstorm to make it. Took time off work. Cooked. Packed. I didn't need a throne, but I didn't expect to be exiled either. When I finally took my seat at the kiddie table, I noticed the paper cup in front of me had a reindeer sticker peeling off. It was the same one from 5 years ago. No one even peeled it off. I smiled to myself, not because it was funny, because it was familiar. Dinner started as it always did. Cheers from Dad, a long-winded toast from Mom about family unity, and plates being passed around with lively chatter. Except for our corner. The kids at my table were more interested in their phones or flicking mashed potatoes at each other. "That girl's going places," one uncle said, nodding to Eileen. "Real poised." "She always had that drive," Mom beamed. "Even as a toddler, she was giving orders in the sandbox." "And Marisol?" someone asked. "Oh, Mary likes her books," Mom said with a little chuckle. "She's our quiet one." My cousin nudged my elbow. "That's not a bad thing." I gave her a small smile. "It's not always a good thing either." One guest commented on my new haircut. Before I could thank them, Mom added, "She used to look so cute with long hair. I told her that, didn't I?" Dad chimed in without lifting his eyes from his plate. "At least she's not making a scene like last year." I didn't make a scene last year. I'd asked, politely, not to be excluded from the family photo because I was still in the kitchen cleaning up. But polite and making trouble blurred easily when you didn't speak the Carter family language, obedience masked as grace. I looked down at my plate and slowly chewed. The rolls I'd brought were gone, probably scarfed down by one of the teenagers without anyone realizing they were mine. Fine. When the plates were cleared and the laughter turned to wine talk and stock predictions, I slipped away to the living room. The photo frame was wrapped in gold paper with a silver bow, hand-cut, because I'd run out of ribbon. Inside, a picture of the 5 of us at the lake house. It was the one moment in my memory when no one was faking happy. I handed it to Mom as she passed by with a tray of cookies. She took it absently. "Oh, thanks, Mary. I'll open it later." "It's a family photo," I said. She smiled, thin and distracted. Lovely. I'm sure it's sweet. She placed it on the counter, next to an empty wine bottle. Later that night, after the guests had left and the dishwasher hummed, I returned to the kitchen to grab my coat. The wrapping paper was torn, the frame was gone. I opened the trash bin, and there it was, under greasy napkins, orange peels, and a half-eaten drumstick. I reached in with my bare hand and lifted it. A glob of cranberry sauce clung to the corner. You threw it out? I asked quietly. Mom turned from the sink. What? My gift. You tossed it. She barely blinked. Oh, that. I thought it was just some arts and crafts clutter. It was a picture of your family. Well, dear, we already have so many pictures, she said, drying her hands. We can't keep everything. I didn't say anything else. I just rinsed the cranberry off the glass, dried it with a napkin, and walked back to the den. It was always like this. Not one big wound, just 1,000 paper cuts. I remembered being 10. My birthday passed and no one noticed. Aileen had the flu, so I understood. But when I asked the next day if we'd do cake later, Dad said, "We'll try next year, okay?" They never did. It was never loud neglect. It was strategic forgetting. I stood at the patio window, watching the snow dance under the porch light. Laughter drifted from the family room. Corinthia's voice rose above the others. To a family that always stands together. I whispered, just not with me. I didn't cry. I didn't plan revenge. But something in me, quiet, long ignored, took a breath. Not rage, just resolve. A steady kind of knowing. As I turned to head back into the house, I heard her voice again, louder this time, for the remaining guests to hear. At least we know who belongs at the big table. I didn't turn around. I didn't re-enter the warmth. I walked to the front door, pulled it open, and stepped outside. The day after Christmas, the house felt like it had already moved on. Decorations still clung to the windows, the lights continued blinking on cue, but the warmth had fizzled, like a fireplace left burning without anyone sitting beside it. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table when Mom came in holding a stack of Christmas cards. "Can you help address these, Marisola?" she asked, without looking at me. I nodded and reached for the pen. It was something I always helped with, even as a teenager. I'd been the one with neat handwriting, the one who made sure names were spelled right, and the envelopes looked like they came from a family that cared. But when I looked at the signature block Mom had already written in the cards, something stopped me. Merry Christmas from Corinthia, Vesper, and Eileen Carter. Just the three of them. I flipped through another card, and another. Same thing. No mention of me. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my tone even, "you left my name off." She gave a dismissive shrug. "Oh, well, you're not really here that much anymore, sweetie. And you're almost 30. Do you really want your name on a holiday card like some kid?" "But Aileen's name is on it," I said, gesturing toward the stack. "Yes," she said brightly. "We added her name twice. Once at the bottom, and once in that little flourish. I thought it was cute." "Our pride," I read out loud from the card. "That's what it says." She smiled. "It is. She's done so well this year. Early acceptance to her graduate program, the internship, just wonderful things." There was no malice in her voice. That's what made it worse. It wasn't a calculated insult. It was a routine omission. Like I'd quietly expired from the family portrait and she'd never bothered to update me on the decision. That was the first time I realized these cards didn't represent family. They represented narrative. And in hers, I was a footnote at best. Later that night, I sat in my childhood room, scrolling through old emails and trying to ignore the buzzing ache in my chest. A pop-up reminder lit my screen. Marisole's birthday, December 20th. Last week, I hadn't even noticed. I shut the laptop and sat back, letting the moment swallow me. That was the second year in a row it had come and gone without a call, a card, a slice of cake. Nothing. When I'd turned 16, it was dismissed because Eileen had a cheer competition. "We'll celebrate next weekend," Mom had promised. But it never came. Every year after that, there was some reason. Money tight, too many commitments, snowstorm, Someone's flight delayed. This year, no excuse. Just nothing. I asked Dad about it in passing the day after. He blinked, confused. Wait, that was this week? Yeah. He rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, you're not a kid anymore. I figured you'd understand. I did understand. That didn't mean it didn't carve a hollow space right beneath my ribs. The next morning, I went up to the attic to find my box of ornaments. Everyone had their own, with little trinkets and keepsakes from each year. Aileen's was painted with gold stars, her name in calligraphy. Mine was taped together and slightly crushed on one corner. I opened it gently. Inside, I found the ornament I made in second grade. Merry Christmas, Love Mary, written in glitter glue. The glitter had flaked off, and one side was faded from sun damage. It was tucked beneath a broken snow globe. Downstairs, I heard Corinthia calling out, "We'll be putting up the tree in 30 minutes." I brought the box with me and watched as Mom and Aileen unwrapped their pristine decorations. Aileen's face lit up when she found her ballerina figurine. "I love this one," she said, holding it to the light. "That one always reminded me of you," Mom cooed. "So graceful." I held up my ornament. "Do you want me to hang this somewhere?" She turned, blinking. "That old thing? Well, I guess if you really want to." I didn't, but I hung it anyway, off to the side where no one would see. As I stepped back, Mom said with a soft laugh, "You always liked being the quiet one." I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a dismissal. Maybe it had always been both. Dinner that night brought extended family, roasted ham, sweet potatoes, and the same roles everyone fell into year after year. Corinthia managed the room, directing conversation, pouring wine. Aileen charmed every person who passed through the kitchen. I cleared dishes. In the middle of passing rolls, someone asked, "Didn't Marisol get published this year?" I looked up, surprised anyone remembered. Before I could answer, Corinthia waved a hand. "Oh, no, that was Eileen's essay. Marisol helped polish it up." I opened my mouth, closed it. Aileen tilted her head, but said nothing. It was my piece. I'd submitted it to the local journal under my name, with my experience. Aileen had proofread the first draft, made 2-sentence suggestions. That was all. But now it was hers. The guest looked at me, eyebrows slightly raised. I smiled. "That's right, I helped edit. Lying by omission, my specialty. It wasn't an accident, not a slip of memory, it was strategic. I wasn't being forgotten, I was being erased. When Dad changed the topic to weather, everyone followed. That was the Carter way. After dessert, I faked a call from a classmate and stepped outside. The snow had picked up again, softer this time, but steady. Across the street, the neighbors had strung white icicle lights around their fence. Their house looked warm, whole. I stood in the cold for a long while, breath fogging in the dark, phone still in hand. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou's words looped in my mind. I hadn't believed them the 5th, or the 10th, or the 50th time, but I was done pretending now. By the time I re-entered the house, most of the guests were gone. Mom was picking up stray napkins from the table. She brushed past me without meeting my eyes. "Try to look less gloomy when guests are here," she said quietly, a smile still pasted across her lips like the party hadn't ended. I turned my head slightly. "Maybe next year you'll forget me entirely." She didn't hear me, but I meant it more than I've ever meant anything. 2 days after the Christmas dinner, I walked down Main Street holding a stack of cards I had addressed myself. Not the glossy, gold-edged cards my mother sent in her carefully curated batch. These were plain, store-bought ones. I signed them with just my name, no family crest, no fake cheer. The cold bit through my gloves, but I didn't rush. I passed the bakery where Mrs. Klein once slipped me extra scones for babysitting her twins. Her husband stood outside, lighting a cigarette. When he saw me, he gave a quick nod, then looked away before I could return it. A few steps later, I passed the Watsons' porch. Their dog barked excitedly, recognizing me. The Watson kids used to call me Miss Mary when I read to them during winter breaks. Now, their mother pulled the curtain tighter as I approached, pretending not to see me. I stopped in front of the mailbox near the corner and shoved the cards in one by one. Every envelope carried a little protest, a soft declaration that I still existed, even if the people I once counted on now walked the other way. Growing up in a small town, I thought community meant safety, that even if things fell apart at home, someone would notice, someone would care. But I learned the hard way that silence was easier. People didn't want truth leaking into their holiday dinners. It spoiled the shine. When someone chooses not to remember, I whispered to myself, it's because the remembering would require action. That night, as I walked back toward our house, my boots dragging lines through the slushy sidewalk, I remembered a winter when I was 12. Mom and Dad had a screaming match about money. I ran outside barefoot because I thought it was my fault. I had asked for art supplies. Mrs. Lanning across the street pulled back her curtain, made eye contact with me, then let it fall. I stood there for almost 20 minutes before Eileen opened the door and told me Mom said to come back in. No one knocked, no one checked. But 6 years later, at a church potluck, Mrs. Lanning told Mom, "You're parenting, so dignified, you always handle things with grace." And Mom had smiled, tilted her head, and replied, "Well, we believe in raising resilient daughters." I didn't say anything then, but I felt it. Image mattered more than integrity. Back home, I headed straight to the basement. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe something that still had my name on it. Something that proved I wasn't making this all up. The basement smelled like cedar and dust, just as it always had. I opened the old wooden storage cabinet and sifted through the bins. Halloween decorations, Dad's fishing gear, a cracked humidifier no one had used in years. Then I saw it. A box labeled Xmas Decor, Do Not Open. It was duct-taped shut, shoved behind a stack of unopened gift wrap. It didn't look like it had been touched in a long while. My hands trembled as I peeled the tape. Inside were dozens of photos, most of them face down. I pulled one up, my 5th birthday party, the corner torn, frosting smeared across my cheek. Another, me in a Halloween costume, the date scribbled out with black marker. My baby photo was there, the one that used to sit on the mantel. Someone had drawn stars over my eyes with a pen. I didn't hear Mom come down until I heard her shoes creak on the last step. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply. I looked up. I was looking for the family albums. She walked over, saw the photo in my hand. Her mouth tightened. "Oh, that," she said. "Old junk. We didn't need those anymore." "You turned them over," I said. "You threw them out." "They weren't doing anyone any good, Mary," she replied, folding her arms. "You're too old to be clinging to the past." "This isn't clinging," I said, holding up the baby picture. "This is my life." Mom didn't respond. She turned around and walked back upstairs. I stood there for a long moment, the chill of the basement settling deep into my spine. I wasn't crying, I wasn't surprised, but something inside me folded tighter. Even memory can be edited in this house. Later, I sat on my bed and pulled out my notebook, the one I kept for quotes. I wrote, "We think we own our memories, but sometimes others decide which ones get to survive." Underneath it, I scribbled one from Toni Morrison I had underlined years ago. "If you can't tell your story, someone else will, and they'll get it wrong." I tore the page out and slid it into my wallet. Maybe I couldn't change the story they told, but I could keep mine safe. I opened my backpack and tucked the photos in, carefully, wrapping them in a scarf I no longer wore. As I zipped the bag shut, I whispered, "If I can't be framed in this house, I'll frame myself somewhere else." The plan that morning was simple. I was going to pay the deposit for the online writing program I'd been accepted into. I'd saved quietly. Birthday checks from a few years back, money from tutoring middle schoolers after school, tips from my short stint at the cafe near campus. I hadn't told anyone at home, not because I was hiding it, but because I'd learned early on that the things I protected were safer in silence. I pulled on my coat, slid my phone into my back pocket, and opened the banking app. The screen froze. Then the words appeared in red. "Error. Account not found." I blinked, hit refresh, tried again. Still gone. My first thought was glitch. Maybe the app was updating, or I typed the wrong login, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. Instead of pacing in the kitchen or asking Mom for help, because that, I knew, would only make things worse, I decided to go to the bank myself. The local branch was a 15-minute walk through light snow, the kind of cold that numbed your fingers faster than expected but made the world feel quiet. I walked in, greeted the teller politely, and gave my name. She typed it into her system, then looked up slowly. Her face shifted just slightly, not pity, not concern, just unease. "I'm not seeing that account active anymore," she said carefully. "What do you mean?" I kept my tone neutral. She turned the screen toward herself. "It was closed. 2 days ago. Transferred. The authorization came from the listed guardian." I stared at her. "My mother?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am." My jaw tightened. "Transferred where?" She tapped. "To a joint account labeled under household expenses." I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything. I turned and walked out. My cheeks stung, not from the cold, but from what I knew was another deliberate erasure. This time, not just emotional. Financial. On the walk home, the snow seemed heavier, like it was pushing me down rather than falling around me. I thought of every hour I'd spent working late nights, giving up weekends, quietly putting away money for something that belonged only to me. That program wasn't just a course, it was a door, one I'd hoped to open without asking for permission. When I stepped into the house, the smell of cinnamon and cloves hit me. Mom was in the kitchen, apron on, humming. Dad was in his recliner, reading the paper, a picture of domestic calm. I pulled out the now useless checkbook and laid it quietly on the table. Mom looked up. "Oh, honey, what's that for?" "My savings account was closed," I said plainly. She didn't flinch. "Yes, I moved it. That money wasn't really meant to sit there collecting dust, was it?" I didn't respond. "We used it to cover the heating bill and groceries. The holidays are expensive, you know." "That money wasn't for the holidays," I said. Dad lowered the paper. "We let you use our name to open that account. You weren't even 18 when it started. Be grateful we helped." I met his eyes. "It wasn't yours to take." Mom kept stirring cookie dough like nothing happened. "We've always taken care of you, Mary. You think that comes for free?" "I don't owe you my future because you fed me as a child," I said, each word colder than the last. Her smile flattened. "Don't be dramatic." "No," I said, standing straight. "Don't be entitled." Her hands paused in the mixing bowl. I waited for Dad to jump in. He didn't. He just grunted and turned the page. I walked out. I wasn't going to waste breath explaining myself again. I'd come to understand the hierarchy of importance in this house. When I followed their script, I was tolerated. When I tried to write my own, I became a problem. Later that evening, after pretending to read by the window for an hour, I brought it up again. Not the money, but the principle. "Why didn't you tell me you were closing my account?" I asked. Mom sighed, setting down her mug. "You're holding on to something small, Mary. Forgiveness is part of growing up. You're a grown woman now. Let it go." "You stole from me," I replied. "You're acting like we robbed a bank. It was a few $100s, used to support the house you live in." "I don't live in this house," I said. "I sleep here. That's different." Dad finally chimed in. "You don't want to become one of those bitter women who can't let go of petty things." My voice didn't rise. "So when you hurt me, it's called love. When I respond, it's bitterness?" The silence that followed was louder than any shout. I stood still, eyes on both of them. No apology came. Of course, it didn't. I turned and left the room. The night air outside bit at my face, but I welcomed it. I walked down to the park at the end of the street. The snow-covered swings were still, the bench beneath the willow tree untouched. I sat and thought of a line my professor once shared after reading my first submission. "If they only love you when you're silent, they don't love you. They love control." Back then, I'd written it in my notebook and underlined it twice. Now, I understood it. I looked up at the stars. They shimmered like reminders, distant, enduring, unaffected by the mess below. By the time I returned home, the house was dark except for the lamp over the stove. I didn't speak. I didn't slam the door. I walked straight to my room and opened my laptop. I logged into my backup email. the one no one in the family knew about, the one I used when I wanted something to be mine and only mine. I opened a new message and began typing. It wasn't just to the scholarship board. It wasn't just to the university. It was to someone who mattered, someone who could look at my story and see me as I was, not as edited. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time, I knew I wouldn't wait for their permission to find out. The hallways at Greenfield High smelled like bleach and old trophies. It was the kind of sterile quiet that made everything feel far away, even the things that mattered. I was there early, too early, probably, because the guidance counselor had mentioned something about the awards being posted before winter break. The bulletin board stood just outside the main office. There it was. Academic excellence in literary studies. That was mine. It was supposed to be mine. I'd submitted the essay on the symbolism of emotional inheritance in American short fiction, and Mrs. Reynolds had praised it in front of the whole class, and yet the name under the award read, Marisol Carter, not Marisol, not me. I stared for a full 10 seconds, thinking it was just a typo, until I noticed that Eileen's name, right above mine, was spelled perfectly. Her award was for leadership initiative, hers not mine, but hers looked polished, clear, untouchable. I walked into the office and pointed it out to a staff assistant. She squinted, then smiled vaguely. It's not a big deal, hun. People know who you are. I didn't say it, but I thought it. When it's your only name, it's everything. That evening, the house buzzed with preparations for the neighborhood holiday dinner. Mom was in hostess mode, apron, wine, playlist humming through the speakers. Aileen floated between tables in a red dress that matched the cranberry centerpiece. I waited until she was alone in the den, brushing glitter off her sleeve, before I spoke. They spelled my name wrong on the awards board. She didn't look up. They always mess stuff up like that. They didn't mess up yours. She glanced at me. Well, guess Marisol had a good year too. I didn't answer, not because I agreed, but because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure I'd say anything worth repeating. At dinner, the lights were dimmed just right. Guests filtered in with bottles of wine and tins of cookies, praising the house, the decor, the atmosphere. Dad poured bourbon generously. Everyone was glowing with holiday charm. Then came the moment I dreaded most, when people talked just loud enough for the whole room to hear. I have to say, Mr. Callahan, our neighbor 2 doors down, said while scooping mashed sweet potatoes, "You've raised 2 extraordinary young women, Corinthia." "Oh, thank you," Mom beamed. Eileen always knew how to shine. She's a natural. Marisol helps where she can. My fork froze in midair. The chatter around us softened. I heard it. I felt it. Even the clink of a spoon hesitated in midair. "She's the quiet type," Dad added, not missing a beat. "Supportive. Not everyone needs the spotlight." The air turned heavier. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't swallow. I didn't speak. I just counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3, until the burn in my throat dulled. Across the table, Eileen raised her glass. "To family," she said, "and knowing your role in it." A few nervous chuckles followed. "Sibling love, huh?" Someone tried to joke. Mom leaned forward, smiling sweetly. "It's important to know where you're needed and when to let others lead." Aileen smirked, took a sip of wine. I wanted to scream, not because they'd insulted me, but because they'd done it so smoothly, like it was a toast, a hymn. After dessert, I excused myself. I didn't slam my napkin. I didn't drop my fork. I walked, measured, into the kitchen where Mom was rearranging leftover containers. "Don't ever speak for me again," I said. She turned slowly, startled. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Her eyes narrowed. "What's gotten into you?" "You can erase me from the seating chart. You can pretend I don't exist when guests are over, but don't put words in my mouth." She laughed, almost fondly. "Are you going to write a story about this?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm going to live one, and you'll regret not being part of it." Her face dropped, just slightly, enough for me to know I'd struck the right chord. I didn't wait for her to answer. That night, I walked back to the school under the blanket of quiet snow. The building was closed, of course, but the front window left the bulletin board visible from the sidewalk. I pulled a black Sharpie from my coat pocket. I hadn't planned this, but maybe I had. Somewhere in my bones. I uncapped it and carefully wrote my name, the right name, Marisol Carter, in bold strokes across the typo. I stepped back. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The next morning, it was gone. Someone had wiped it off completely, but they didn't know I'd already taken a picture. Christmas Eve came cloaked in that unsettling stillness, the kind that pretends to be peace, but if you listen closely, hums like a wire pulled too tight. I woke early, made myself a cup of coffee no one offered, and sat at the kitchen table to work on my college essay. The final version. The one that might have bought my escape. I opened the laptop, pulled up the file, and hit print. Nothing. The printer blinked, clicked, then jammed. I tried again. Pulled the tray, cleared the path. Tried again. Same result. It was only when I pulled the sheets from the back panel that I saw it. Torn edges, not crumpled, cut, not jammed, shredded. There was no mistaking it. I ran to my room, rifled through my backpack for the USB I'd saved the draft on. Gone. The envelope I had tucked it in was still there, but empty. From the hallway, I heard footsteps. Aileen. She paused in my doorway, arms crossed, smile tucked into the corner of her mouth. "Printer not cooperating?" she asked, voice light, syrupy. I stared at her. She walked away before I answered. I found the shredded paper in the kitchen trash later, wedged beneath the onion skins and pie crust wrappers. I picked up a piece and tried to read it. The ink was still fresh. One corner had the words, "Finding my voice," and another fragment read, "No longer afraid." The irony stung more than the cold. I didn't cry. Not yet. I picked up every piece I could find and set them in a pile on the counter. Then I walked upstairs, past the living room where the TV played a holiday movie at low volume. My parents were on the couch. Corinthia was folding napkins. Vesper held a beer and the remote. "I need to speak with you," I said to her. She didn't look up. "Make it quick, Mary." My essay was destroyed. The printer was tampered with. The draft was shredded and my USB is gone. Corinthia finally glanced at me. So? You should have printed it earlier." "That's on you." "That was intentional," I said, voice steady. "Someone did it on purpose." Vesper didn't turn his head. "You always think someone's out to get you." "I think someone wants me to stay exactly where I am," I said. Corinthia stood, smoothing the napkin stack. "Not everything is about you, Mary. Maybe if you stopped blaming people, you'd have something worth submitting." I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I turned around and walked back upstairs. An hour passed, then 2. The house buzzed with preparations for dinner. Corinthia sang along to Nat King Cole in the kitchen. Aileen rehearsed a speech for some community award she'd never earned. Dad opened his 3rd beer before sunset. By 5:30, the living room was full of laughter, guests arriving, coats draped over chairs, the scent of cinnamon and roast duck thick in the air. I needed air. I slipped on my coat, zipped it high, and stepped onto the porch. Snow was falling hard now, dusting the walkway, piling on the bushes. I stepped down, just far enough to feel the edge of quiet. The door creaked open behind me. "What now?" Aileen said from the threshold. "Running off into the snow again? Classic." I ignored her. She added, "Maybe a walk will fix your attitude." The door shut behind her words. I took 2 steps down the path, enough to feel the sting of wind on my cheeks. It was bitter, almost metallic, like the taste of panic held too long in your mouth. Then I heard it. Boots behind me, heavy, deliberate, Vesper. He came down the porch steps, beer still in hand, shoulders tight with that familiar tension. "You ruin every damn thing," he muttered. I said nothing. "We give you everything," he slurred, "and you throw it back in our face with your mopey, sad act." I turned to walk back. That's when it happened. His hand pressed hard between my shoulder blades and shoved. My knees buckled. My face hit the snow with a blunt thud, ice cutting into my lips, the cold slicing my breath short. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't think. Snow in my ears, my eyelashes, my teeth. Then I heard her. From the porch, Mom's voice carried across the yard. "Consider that your gift." I pushed myself up slowly, snow dripping down my collar, coat soaked through. They turned away before I could even stand. Back inside, I stripped off the coat, changed clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed. No one knocked. No one asked. I pulled a fresh notebook from the drawer and began rewriting the essay from memory, word by word, image by image. Every sentence that had come from pain, I retrieved with purpose. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I tucked the pages into a Ziploc bag, slid it into the lining of my new winter coat, and folded the coat neatly by the door. I stared at the wall for a long time. Not at the photos, I'd already taken mine down. Not at the mirror, I wasn't looking for recognition, just at the empty space. Fight for the things that you care about, Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. I wasn't trying to be followed, but I wasn't going to be erased either. At midnight, I stood by the window, watching the snow pile on the driveway, untouched. They gave me a gift, I whispered to the glass. Now I know I'm never coming back. I woke up to the sound of wind pushing against the window panes. It was the kind of morning that begged to be ignored, but I couldn't afford to be slow. I had a task: finalize the revised version of my essay and get it ready for upload before the deadline closed in. I threw on a sweater, walked to my desk, and reached for the coat where I had hidden the rewritten copy. But when I picked it up, it was damp, cold and soggy like it had been left outside. My heart sank. I unzipped the lining where I had tucked the pages the night before. Gone. I checked under the bed, in the drawer, even under the mattress. Nothing. I opened my laptop, hoping maybe I had uploaded a draft online without remembering. No files. No backups. My breath quickened, not from panic, but from realization. This wasn't a mistake. It was surgical. Precise. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the room. This wasn't paranoia. This was sabotage. That evening, I was expected to attend the Academic Scholars Dinner. It was the first time the school had invited students to speak on their experience, their drive, their aspirations. I'd been nominated by Miss Reynolds. I was supposed to represent the writing track. I went to the closet and pulled out the navy blue gown I'd bought for the occasion. Clean, pressed, folded just right. Except it wasn't there. Instead, a wrinkled, outdated dress from high school had taken its place. I searched the rack twice, checked the laundry basket, the underbed storage. My dress was gone. Outside my door, I heard the click of heels. Aileen walked past, phone in hand, wearing the gown. She stopped, looked at me. "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "I didn't think you were using this. It was just hanging there." "You knew it was mine," she shrugged. "Did I?" Behind her, Mom passed with a tray of desserts. She said nothing, not even a glance. "You still look fine," Dad muttered as I entered the hallway. "Don't cause drama tonight." At the dinner, the lights were low and the table settings immaculate. Students stood in clusters, faculty mingled, and at the podium, names were read out like confetti. I stood in the back, holding a glass of water with both hands, dress digging into my shoulders. Then Eileen's name echoed through the room. The host, Mr. Kelly, cleared his throat. "We'd like to recognize one of our students whose recent essay on identity and resilience moved our committee deeply." My body stilled. "The narrative structure was emotionally mature for a high schooler," he continued. "It reminded us why we teach." Eileen walked to the podium, flawless. "Thank you," she said, smile perfect. "I wrote it alone, and from the heart." I didn't move. I couldn't. My words, my story, mine. I didn't need to see the paper to know. It was mine. The phrasing, the structure, the rhythm. I'd bled for that essay. And now she wore it. After dinner, I didn't go home. I walked with slow purpose to Eileen's room. She wasn't back yet. I slipped in, turned on her desk lamp, and opened her laptop. No password. I clicked through the folders. Scholarship Essay 2023 Final Doc X. I opened it. There it was, line for line, sentence for sentence. Mine. I right-clicked the file, hit Properties. Created December 23rd. Submitted 11:59 p.m. I took photos, every tab, every timestamp. As I turned to leave, I heard the floor creak. Corinthia stood in the doorway, arms folded. Need something? She asked. I looked her dead in the eyes. Just wanted to see what winning without integrity looks like. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. In my room, I sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, burner email ready. I typed, To Admissions Board. Subject, Academic Misrepresentation. Urgent. I attached every file. Screenshots, metadata, the original draft with date stamps, photos of the printed pages. Then I added a short message. I understand this puts me in a difficult light, but silence would make me complicit. Please see the attached. I trust you to know what to do next. I paused before hitting send. Thought of Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Click. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth when Eileen knocked on the door. Did you go into my laptop? Her voice was tight, controlled. I wiped my mouth with a towel, turned the knob, and looked at her. Why? I asked. Lose something? Her face didn't twitch, but her eyes flared. I stepped aside to let her pass. This time, it wasn't me who'd be erased. Sunday morning arrived coated in artificial warmth. Mom had prepared a family brunch, which in our house meant packaged croissants reheated in the oven and a tablecloth that hadn't seen daylight since Eileen's high school graduation. The moment I walked into the dining room, I knew something was off. Aileen was uncharacteristically cheerful. She poured orange juice into everyone's glass and offered to pass out the napkins, her smile too rehearsed, her voice too crisp. You know, she said, almost sweetly, maybe we should all just move forward after the last few days. Clean slate, right? Vesper chuckled into his coffee. Guess some people in this house are finally learning how to act like adults. Mom, without looking at me, added, Let's just focus on the future, shall we? We don't need to keep bringing up old tension. I cut into my eggs, forcing the knife slowly through the overcooked yolk. Sure, I said. Let's do that. They smiled. I didn't. Later that afternoon, Eileen cornered me by the staircase. Can we talk? She asked, already leading me toward the back hallway. I followed, arms crossed. I just want to clear the air, she began. Things got messy, and maybe I said stuff I shouldn't have. Which part are you referring to? I asked. The stealing or the lying? She laughed, light and forced. Oh, come on. You know no one would have believed that essay came from you. I didn't blink. Seriously, Mary, be honest. You're not exactly the standout type. I mean, you're smart, but not impressive. Her words had a rhythm to them, like she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. You sabotaged the printer, I said flatly. Printer? She raised her eyebrows. What printer? You tossed my USB. I don't even know where you keep your stuff. That's when she leaned in closer, voice lower. And even if I did, she whispered, you'd never be able to prove it. What she didn't know was that my phone had been recording since she said, Can we talk? The voice memo app running silently in my coat pocket, capturing every last word. I didn't reply. I let her finish whatever performance she was trying to sell. Then I turned and walked back to my room. There, I played the recording back twice, once to make sure it was clear, second to relive what it felt like to catch someone mid-lie. Then I backed it up to a private folder in the cloud and made a duplicate on a spare USB I had hidden in the lining of my toiletry bag. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. Brené Brown's voice echoed in my mind. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to be clear. As I looked for a small lockbox to hide the USB, I opened the door to the attic and climbed the creaky steps slowly. The air smelled like cedar, dust, and disuse. Piles of boxes were labeled in Mom's handwriting. Christmas wreaths, fall candles, Easter linens. Then one box caught my eye. Camera, family, old. I opened it. Inside was a handheld camcorder, the kind Dad used to pull out during birthdays. The battery was dead, of course, but the charger was tucked neatly beneath it. I brought it downstairs, plugged it in, and waited. After an hour, it blinked back to life. I clicked through the tapes until I found one labeled Christmas 2012. My hands shook. The footage began with Aileen unwrapping a bicycle, Mom pretending to cry tears of joy, Vesper lifting a glass. It was normal, performative. Then, just as the camera dropped slightly out of focus, the angle shifted, a small scuffle near the doorway. My younger self, no more than 14, standing stiffly in the cold with no gloves. "Get inside!" Vesper barked off camera. I didn't move. He stepped forward, shoved my shoulder hard. I fell into the snow. Off screen, Mom's voice floated out, perfectly calm. "She'll learn her place." I paused the video. It took me a full minute to move. I downloaded the footage, made 2 copies. Then I packed both USBs, the one with the essay recording and the one with the video, into a pouch and zipped it inside the lining of my backpack. I opened my email and clicked on the draft I had started to the university board, attached the files, wrote 1 line. "I believe this offers necessary context." I didn't send it. Not yet. I picked up my phone and called Aunt Tavelin. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Mary?" "I need a witness," I said. "Someone who isn't afraid to see the truth." There was no pause. "Tell me where and when." That night, I waited until the house had quieted. Then I walked into the dining room, placed my phone and the camera gently on the table. Corinthia entered with her tea. She looked at the devices, then at me. "What are you planning now?" she asked, sipping slowly. I looked up, eyes steady. "Let's play it together." The auditorium lights were too bright for a morning event. Rows of students in semi-formal wear filled the space, buzzing with half-whispers and restless energy. My name had been on the list, one of the scholarship semi-finalists invited for official recognition. Mom insisted on attending. "We should be seen supporting you," she'd said, as if presence could fix what she'd broken. Aileen, unusually stiff, walked 3 paces behind her, barely saying a word. As I took my seat, I slipped my phone into my coat pocket and started the recording. I didn't know what might happen, but I'd learned the hard way. Record everything. The principal stepped onto the stage, adjusted the mic, and greeted the room with the kind of voice people reserve for donor dinners and local press. After a few generic introductions, they began rolling the highlight reel, a video montage of student achievements, photos, quotes, and clips from interviews. Eileen's name flashed first. There she was, poised, polished, smiling into the camera, talking about resilience. I forced myself to watch every second. Then came mine, or rather, what should have been. My face appeared, briefly. The first 2 seconds of my recorded interview played, then black. The screen glitched. The audio cut. There was an awkward pause. Someone coughed. "Sorry for the technical error," an administrator said, stepping quickly to the mic. "Let's continue with the rest of our program." Whispers moved like static through the rows. I scanned the crowd, saw heads turning. A girl in the row in front of me leaned over to her friend and mouthed something I couldn't hear. I looked toward Aileen. She avoided my eyes. Mom sat, hands folded, a thin smile on her face, like the glitch had been predicted. Afterward, in the hallway, a student I vaguely knew, Mason I think, approached. "Hey," he said. "Sorry about the video thing. That was weird." I nodded. "Yeah, I don't know what happened." Another student joined him. "We heard you got disqualified." I frowned. "From what?" "You didn't hear? Someone sent a letter to the board, said your essay was fabricated or something." I blinked. "Who told you that?" He looked around. "It's just what's going around." Inside my chest, a thud. There was only one person who had access to my early drafts. One person I had trusted, stupidly, naively, Jess, my best friend. I left the building without another word. That afternoon, after school hours, I waited in the parking lot. Jess came out wearing her old hoodie, arms crossed against the cold. She didn't notice me until I stepped out from behind the pillar. Her eyes widened. "Oh, Mary. Hey. We need to talk." She hesitated. "Now?" "Yes." We walked to the edge of the lot. The wind howled through the trees, and the silence between us was louder. You sent something to the board. She froze. What? You told them my essay wasn't mine. Jess's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I didn't, not like that. I was worried if it came out, people would think I helped. It wasn't personal. You sent doubt, I said, disguised as concern. She looked down. I thought, if it all blew over, no one would know. Except me. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to lose anything, Mary. I didn't want to be dragged down. You weren't being dragged. You jumped. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, I said. You're just late. I turned and walked away. At home, dinner was on the table. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes. Someone had gone through the trouble of slicing lemons for garnish. It all looked so normal, like the house hadn't been a war zone the night before. Mom smiled. Long day? I didn't answer. Aileen didn't look up from her plate. Dad poured wine into both their glasses. I sat. Halfway through the meal, Aileen muttered, You're still not the victim, you know. I looked at her. You're right, I'm not, she rolled her eyes. Because victims stay silent, I continued, and I'm not doing that anymore. I pulled the USB from my pocket, placed it gently in the center of the table. Mom's expression didn't change, but her posture did. Slight shift, shoulders tightened. There's something you should all hear and watch. No one moved. No one reached for it. I picked up the remote, pressed play. First, Eileen's voice, recorded days ago in the hallway. Her own words played back like a confession she'd never thought would have an audience. No one would believe it was yours anyway. You're too invisible to write something that good. I watched her face shift. First confusion, then dread. Then came the video. Christmas, 2012. The projector cast the grainy footage onto the dining room wall. There I was, young, cold, scared. There was Dad, yelling. There was Mom saying, She'll learn her place. The room went quiet. Forks rested mid-air. Breath held. My voice, steady as a drumbeat, cut through it. Now the world will know what place you put me in. I dressed slowly, pacing each step as though the weight of the evening hung from the hem of my dress. My name had been reinstated to the official school announcement. They didn't say why, didn't call attention to the correction, but it was there, in print, on record. Tonight was the school's formal award presentation. My name would be called. My words would be heard, or so I thought. Mom hovered around me with a forced air of maternal warmth, dabbing foundation on my cheeks like we'd never exchanged venom the week before. You'll thank me someday for pushing you, she said softly, adjusting the collar of my blouse. I know how hard things have been for you lately, but tonight's about moving forward. Eileen stood at the doorway, arms crossed. She hadn't said a word all afternoon. And Vesper, nowhere to be seen. Convenient. I pretended not to flinch as Mom dusted my shoulders with her finishing powder. I just want everything to go smoothly tonight, she continued, her voice half-whisper. Let's keep it elegant, Mary. No drama. I nodded once, turned away from her, and grabbed my phone. A new notification lit up the screen. A message sent accidentally, but not to the intended recipient. It read, If she tries anything on stage, we'll say she's mentally unstable again. Just smile. It was from Mom, sent to me, intended for Aileen. My stomach twisted, but not from surprise, from confirmation. They weren't just afraid I'd speak. They had a plan to discredit me if I did. I stared at the screen, took a breath, and took a screenshot. Then another. I forwarded it to myself and to the only staff member I trusted, Ms. Reynolds. Then I slid the phone into my purse and zipped it shut. At the school, the lights were dimmed with ceremony. Banners of achievement hung over the stage. My name printed on the event program beside the words, Academic Integrity and Resilience Award. I took a seat in the front row as assigned. Mom followed, smiling, waving to other parents as if she hadn't just composed a character assassination by text. Aileen sat beside her, tight-lipped. Something about her looked thinner, not physically, but hollow. After several introductions and a piano solo, the principal took the stage. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate not only achievement, but perseverance, and we honor those who have earned their place through character as much as talent." A few students were called, one for science, one for community service. Then Eileen's name. She walked to the stage gracefully, accepting a leadership mention with a smile that barely reached her eyes. I didn't clap. Then, my name. "Marisol Carter," the principal said, "for academic excellence and personal resilience." The room clapped politely, some louder than others. I walked slowly to the stage, notes in hand. The microphone stood steady under the soft glow of the spotlight. I took a breath and began. "I want to thank Miss Reynolds and the scholarship committee for recognizing the work, not just in the classroom, but the kind that happens quietly, often when no one's looking." I scanned the crowd. "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," I quoted Maya Angelou. I took one step forward. "And this past year," the crowd shifted, a rustle. Then she was beside me. Mom. Her smile tight, her grip on the mic stem firm. "Thank you so much," she said, smoothly interrupting, "for supporting our daughters." Laughter scattered through the audience like dropped marbles. I stepped back. I didn't argue. I reached into my folder, pulled out a single sheet, and handed it to the principal sitting off stage. It was the printed screenshot of the text Mom had sent me. The principal read it, looked at me, then at Mom. Her face didn't shift, but her body did. I turned back to the audience. "Some truths," I said calmly, "don't need a microphone to be heard." And I walked off stage. The applause didn't come right away, but when it did, it started from the back row. A slow ripple, gaining volume. Teachers, classmates, parents. It wasn't a roar, but it was enough. Mom stood frozen, still holding the mic, her smile wavering. A staff member approached her, whispered something. She was led gently off the stage. I returned to my seat. My hands trembled, but not from fear. I looked around. Aileen sat still, staring at the floor. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Miss Reynolds slipped into the seat beside me. "You were clear," she whispered. I nodded. "Finally," I whispered back. As the event closed, I collected my purse and jacket, stepping into the aisle. A teacher I barely knew stopped me near the exit. "You weren't invisible tonight," she said with a knowing smile. I smiled faintly. I never was. When I opened my eyes, the house was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not silent, there was still the low hum of the furnace, the creak of old wood as it adjusted in the winter cold. But quiet. Still. No footsteps pacing outside my door. No passive-aggressive throat clears. No slam of the dishwasher. I sat up slowly, unsure at first if it was morning or just some late-night moment stretched too far. Then sunlight filtered through the half-cracked blinds, landing soft and pale across the old dresser. My suitcase sat by the door. I'd packed it the night before, every movement deliberate. The speech was done, the video was played, the message was delivered. There was nothing left to say, not for them, not for me. I waited. For a knock, maybe. For Corinthia to come in with that overly sweet tone she used when trying to manipulate. For Vesper to grunt his disapproval from the hall. Even for Aileen to burst in and scream. But none of them came. And that told me everything. I pulled on my jeans, layered up beneath my coat, and laced my boots. The air in the room still held the echo of my childhood, but none of its warmth. When I walked downstairs, they were already in their usual spots. Aileen sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for a different version of reality to load. She didn't look up when I entered. Corinthia stood by the sink, coffee mug in hand. She glanced at me briefly, then turned back to the window like I was no more than a neighbor passing through. Vesper's chair was empty. Of course. He had always found ways to disappear when confrontation no longer suited him. I crossed the kitchen, placed a sealed envelope in the center of the table. Inside was a printed copy of my final essay, links to the audio and video files, and one short note handwritten on a yellow sticky. "This isn't revenge, it's reality." Corinthia didn't touch it. Aileen looked at it like it might bite her. I picked up my backpack and walked to the door. Outside, the air was sharp but refreshing, like biting into something clean after tasting dust for too long. I walked down the front steps, past the bushes still wearing last week's snow, and turned toward Main Street. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always had. Mr. Callahan's flag still drooped in the breeze. Mrs. Lanning's dog barked through the same corner window. Familiar faces peeked out from behind curtains, but none waved. Not that I needed them to. Their silence wasn't new. It just finally stopped hurting. I passed the spot where I used to wait for the school bus, remembering the time I stood there in the snow, cheeks red, hands numb, because no one remembered it was a teacher workday. Now I wasn't waiting for anyone. A bus pulled into the terminal 3 blocks ahead. My steps slowed, not because I doubted, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to leave on my own terms. My phone buzzed. A message from Aunt Tavelin. "Room's ready. Soup's hot. No judgment here." I smiled. At the corner, I called her. She answered before the second ring. "Are you safe?" she asked. "I'm not just safe," I said. "I'm free." She exhaled into the phone. "Good. That's all I needed to hear. This isn't the end of your story, honey. It's the first chapter you get to write yourself." I hung up, stepped onto the bus, and dropped a few bills into the fare box. The driver nodded, and I found a seat by the window. The town began to slide past. Familiar storefronts, the coffee shop that never got my order right, the bookstore where I used to pretend to read just to avoid going home. As the houses shrank and the road stretched ahead, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt done, not defeated, not broken, just done waiting for an apology that was never going to come. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and scrolled to the folder labeled Evidence. Not to rewatch, just to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that everything I remembered, everything I lived, had weight, had proof. I whispered, "You don't need them to admit what they did. You just need to stop waiting for it." As the bus curved onto the highway, a new message arrived. Subject: "Your submission has been approved." I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the screen, letting the words settle. I leaned back in my seat, let the hum of the road lull the ache in my spine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running. I was choosing. The wind was different here, less of a threat, more of a hum. As I stepped onto campus, the early spring air still held a chill, but it didn't bite. It nudged. My fingers curled tighter around the strap of my backpack, the printed student ID swinging gently against my side. Marisol Carter, scholarship recipient. That name, spelled correctly, laminated, recognized. The buildings loomed with newness, a kind of sturdy promise in their bricks and banners. Everything felt cleaner, lighter. Even if my stomach still nodded when I saw a group laughing together or heard a teacher's voice rise in authority, I knew this place wasn't meant to hurt me, not the way home did. Healing isn't the absence of anger. It's the presence of something more meaningful than rage. I had traded silence for intention. Back in Greenfield, they weren't saying much either, but the silence there reeked of fear. Word traveled faster than I expected. Maybe it was the video, maybe the audio clip. Maybe just a domino effect of everything I refused to bury. Whatever it was, the school launched an investigation. Corinthia was put on administrative leave, pending ethical review regarding conduct toward students and family representation. The phrase was neat and quiet, but I knew what it meant. They couldn't ignore the video, or the pattern. Aileen's scholarship was revoked, not suspended, revoked. The admissions board at her chosen school received the metadata from both our submissions. They issued a polite but decisive letter stating that her application no longer met the university's integrity standards. Dad lost a nomination for the local Community Leadership Award. The email he forwarded to his friend, trying to plead his case, somehow ended up online. I didn't return to Greenfield, not for confrontation, not for closure. People told me all about it anyway. Mutual friends, whispered messages, classmates who once ignored me now sliding into my inbox like they'd always believed me. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I wrote a letter, not a dramatic one, not a monologue, just a plain, single page. "Dear Corinthia, Vesper, and Eileen," it began. "I'm no longer someone you can manipulate. I'm no longer scared of you being louder than me. I don't need revenge. I have reality, and it's loud enough on its own. I folded in a printed copy of my award letter. A photo of the university building with my dorm window circled. A return address. Not because I expected anything, but because they would see it and know they were never invited. At the bottom of the letter, I wrote, "In case you ever learn how to apologize without excuses." Then I sealed it, mailed it, and blocked them all. Tavelin visited 2 weeks into the semester. She showed up with a tote full of baked goods, a sweater she'd knitted for me over the holidays, and a hug that didn't need to be explained. We sat under the cherry trees near the student union. She said nothing about the news articles, or the school assembly, or the video. She just looked at me and said, "You've been quiet a long time. I hope that's not a habit anymore." I laughed. Not the kind that covers pain. The kind that lets air in. Around me, a new family was taking shape. One of my classmates slid next to me during a panel on creative nonfiction. He whispered, "You're kind of a legend already. Your piece was more than a story." I smiled. It was the truth. Another student nodded. Not everyone can survive telling theirs. I looked at Tavelin and thought of a phrase she once wrote in a birthday card. Chosen family isn't second best. It's a conscious upgrade. Later that month, I was asked to be the closing speaker at the university's spring assembly for new students. They wanted someone who understood what it meant to speak when you've spent too long being silenced. I didn't print a speech. I walked to the stage in jeans, with no index cards in hand. I stood at the podium, scanning the crowd of unfamiliar but willing faces. I once had a microphone taken from me mid-sentence. I began. I was standing on a stage just like this one. And in that moment, it wasn't the silence that hurt most. It was how quickly everyone accepted it. I paused. Not for drama, for clarity. But that wasn't the end of my story. It was the turning point. I let my breath slow. You don't need to prove yourself to people who benefit from your silence. You only need to speak clearly for yourself. The right people will listen, and the wrong ones will fear it. The room stood. Applause, not just for the words, but for the fact that I had chosen to own them. No one stood beside me, no parent beamed from the front row, and yet I had never felt more seen. As I stepped off the stage, a staff member handed me a small envelope. Inside was a thank you note, signed by the university's president, congratulating me for demonstrating that truth isn't loud, but it is lasting. I folded it into my pocket. Outside, the breeze had shifted. The trees rustled as if applauding in private. I walked toward the dorms, my boots clicking against the stone walkway. No one followed. No one needed to. And as I passed the flagpole near the fountain, I whispered to myself, just loud enough to make it real. That winter didn't kill me. It taught me who to become.